Ready your wands. As the sub-officer shouts at us to make the final preparations, I exchange glances with Schnell, a young elf recruit from my company. We share a nod, after which a grim determination grows in his face. This would be the first time he engages in close-quarters combat. I don't say it, but chances are low he'll be alive tomorrow. For the past 2 days, the Abyssal have been shelled with holy shells, after which several runs have been done by the Wyvern Riders to weaken the enemy fortifications further. Now, it is our turn to join the fray. The war for the Promised Land had been raging for 6 years now, and manpower seems to be growing thin if even young elves are starting to get recruited. Schnell clasps his hands together in prayer to Solara, the goddess of light and healing. Meanwhile, I pray to Pyros, the god of fire and war, although chances are the only blessing I will be bestowed is that of a swift and painless death. After the moments of prayer subside, a quiet stillness falls over the entire trench. The only sounds left are the shifting of clothes, the scurrying of rats, and the sound of an inexperienced recruit vomiting the dwarven cheese and brandy they gave us earlier. The land is grey and dead. Countless cursed and holy shells have scarred the land beyond recognition. The bodies of the Abyssal are spread across the ground. In certain areas it is more like an ankle-deep paste, layered on the ground like jam on bread, except it's all rotten and stinking, and infested with rats. It's a trick they figured out during the second year of the war. The diseases within their bodies do not affect themselves, but take a huge toll on the priests of Solara. Now, we barely have enough divine favour to keep the plague at bay, let alone treat the wounded. As the final flaps of the Wyvern Riders recede over us, the sub-officer takes out a whistle and blows into it. A shrill sound pierces the silence, and all at once action ensues. One after another, we all scale the wooden ladders out of the trenches and onto the earth above. Schnell is beside me as we begin running across the land. In our way are pits and layers of barbed wire, but that is the least of our worries. Soon, enemy spells begin flying in our direction. Multicolored light flying in every which way, too fast to possibly dodge. A spell impacts the floor in front of me, and steam starts to rise as a potent acid begins to eat away at the ground. I sidestep it, making sure that Schnell is still with me. An explosive mid-tier spell hits the dwarf on the right side of me, reducing the bearded soldier into a fine mist, which ignites into flames as the secondary effect of the spell activates. Schnell is caught in the blast and falls into a shallow pit, landing with a wet squelch into a pile of what once used to be flesh. I hurry over to him and grab him by the shoulders. Spells whiz over us, but the pit is luckily deep enough that most can't reach us. "Did any of it get in your mouth?" I scream at Schnell, as he looks at me with a dazed look. He doesn't respond as he stares into the sky. I shake him again, demanding him to answer me. If he got any inside his system, then we will have to use a healing gem to dispel the disease. However, it would be the last one I have, and it would be wasteful to spend one of the very few gems, unless necessary. Still, however, he doesn't answer me. He simply slowly points up with his finger. I curse, as I follow his finger and see a formation of winged demons soaring in the sky, approaching our position at a rapid pace. They have the appearance of an ape who lost all hair, had grey skin, and decided to sprout large dark red bat wings from their shoulder blades. In their hands I see them clutching what appears to be large metallic canisters, similar to the modern milk canisters used back home. Only these canisters aren't filled with delicious milk, but with the poison gas granted to them by their god Varleth, bringer of plague. "Gas! Gas!" rings out everywhere, as I activate my amulet. Schnell, snapping out of his daze, hurries to put on his gas mask, a new invention made by the priests of Aquaria, goddess of water and wisdom, meant to alleviate Arthurius, god of wind and protection, and his priests from having to protect all of us from the cursed gas. Luckily, I had found an amulet with a holy gem embedded in it, dedicated to Arthurius on the body of an officer 3 years ago. Since then, the amulet has saved me time and time again. With the protective film covering my face, I am on the other 3 occupants of our ditch, one dwarf, another human, and Schnell, and take aim with my wand and start shooting spells at the incoming demons. My first shot misses, as does my second, but thanks to the guidance of Pyros, my third shot nicks the wing of a demon, causing it to stiffen as the frost spell takes root. Soon, the demon is unable to stay afloat, and it drops, causing the canister it was holding to burst on the ground and a cloud of green toxins. Soon the demons are upon us, and clouds of green burst wherever we look. The demons then retreat, likely to get more poison gas. Spells keep whizzing overhead, as the green cloud starts to slowly fill our ditch. Meanwhile, the soldiers of the overworld keep rushing towards the trenches of the dark forces. Suddenly, another explosion spell impacts the side of our ditch, causing all of the occupants to fly to the side. I grunt as I feel myself impact the earth, my amulet not activating, notifying me that I'm either beyond saving or that I wasn't heavily injured. In a daze, I feel for myself. I feel no pain, but pain only appears later when wounded. I check that all my limbs are attached and that I can wiggle my toes. Seeing that the film on my head prevented me from getting any of the filth on the ground into my mouth fills me with relief. Assured that I wasn't dead yet, I tried to get my bearings. Schnell seems to be in a daze, but the gas mask should have prevented him from ingesting any of the rotten remains of the abyssal. The dwarf seems to be only lightly wounded, however the human seemed to have lost his gas mask. He's crouching on all fours as he's coughing and wheezing. His eyes are locked onto mine, and I can see the pleading within them. He knows that I am one of the only ones from our company who has a healing gemstone. But he's perhaps unaware or in denial that once ingesting the toxic gas created by the priest of Zaleth, only a priest of Solara could save him, and even then only if he was treated within the first few seconds. By now, when blood started to pour out of his eyes, ears and nose, it was far too late. His blood has become solid in his veins, and his throat is swollen so much that his lungs are no longer able to suck in air. The pleading within his eyes never fades, and his gaze never leaves mine. Everyone in the ditch is still, though the shouts and spells are still very loud outside the little oasis that is our ditch. The only sound that originates from our ditch is the gurgling of the human, struggling to and failing to breathe. Still lying on my side from where the blast took me, I reach my fallen wand, replace the spent gemstone, and point it at the infected human. Schnell raises his arm as if he would protest, but before he can do anything, I activate the wand and freeze the head of the human. It was quick, albeit the poison made it painful. The amount of enemy spells has severely lessened since the beginning. That can only mean that the assault has reached the enemy trench, and that the melee has already begun. After exchanging a glance with the dwarf, I have Shell to his feet, and begin to run towards the enemy lines. Schnell, being a live elf, is naturally faster than me, and yet I am easily able to keep up. We continue running in the direction of the sound of shouting, crunching bones, and screams of pain. All around us are screaming humans, elves, dwarfs, and other creatures. Some are being tended to by priests, but most are not. As their wounds start to mix with the corrupted earth, their veins gain a darker sheen, and their screams morph into soft whimpers until even those fall silent. I contemplate using my healing gem on a wounded dwarf, who seems to have lost his right leg to a clean cut, likely caused by a windblade. He was crying and clutching his leg while rocking back and forth. "Mama, you were right. I never should have left you. My leg! Oh gods, my leg!" I run past the pleading dwarf together with Schnell, deciding to save the gem in case I need it. I am sure the gods will damn my soul for this, but I'm pretty sure my soul was already bound to be doomed, due to the things I've done in the past 6 years. Just another sin in the long list of sins. Schnell seems hesitant, but doesn't voice his concerns. Soon, in front of us, we can see the unfolding melee. Everywhere one would look, soldiers are fighting Abyssal in a gruesome display of carnage. On the left side, it seems like a holy knight, supported by a wizard and a greater priest, is squaring off against a greater Abyssal, probably the commander of this region of the enemy trench. The greater Abyssal looks like a regular human, only if it had claws, His skin was grey and it had 2 horns and a tail. I rushed to the right side, shooting the wand into a regular abyssal, who was locked in combat with a human soldier. My frost spell hits it in the leg, causing it to lose its balance and stumble. The human uses this chance to drive his short dagger into his heart. The abyssal cries out, and a look of despair and disbelief briefly flashes over his expression, before it topples over and dies. I don't spend any time looking at the abyssal, as from the corner of my eye I notice another abyssal raising its wand in my direction. I dash to the side while activating my amulet, the low-tier acid spell impacting my magic shield, where my left arm is, and where my heart used to be. I train my wand onto the abyssal, however, before I can fire, it rushes me and tackles me into the filthy ground. As it is lying on me, both of us are winded. With my amulet having expended most of its energy protecting me from the previous spell, I will need to allow it to recharge for at least 20 minutes before it can do anything more than filter air. 20 minutes is an eternity in combat. I desperately shove my assailant off me as I reach for my dagger at my hip. But before I can pull it out of its sheath, the abyssal gains its bearings and lunges for my face. As I am still lying on my back, there is nowhere I can escape, so I raise my left arm, allowing it to sink its claws into my flesh. I grip my teeth as I pull my dagger and attempt to plunge it into the skull of my opponent. However, it disengages its left claws from my left forearm and uses its hand to grip my wrist before I can sink my blade into its head. Luckily, it only uses fingers instead of its claws to grasp my arm, though its claws are gradually sinking into my flesh. Locked in a stalemate, I slowly start to get desperate, as I have no more cards to play. My left forearm is used as a shield to prevent its right claws from digging into my face, and my dagger in my right hand is being stopped by its left arm, slowly cutting into my arm by tightening its grip onto my arm, and causing shallow cuts to surface. The abyssal locks into my eyes and splits its mouth into a wide grin. Its bloodshot eyes have tiny pupils staring directly into mine, relishing the coming kill. Slowly I can feel its poison seeping into my bloodstream, through the wounds it inflicted with its claws. All hope seems lost and I contemplate offering one last prayer to Pyros, as suddenly the abyssal is ripped from me with a shocked expression, and a dagger is plunged into its head. I gasp in pain as the claws are pulled out of my flesh, and immediately activate my last healing gem. At the beginning of the war, every soldier had 2, but now you were considered lucky if you even had 1. I certainly feel lucky, as I gasp in relief at feeling my wounds close, and more importantly, the poison being cleansed from my system. I look up at my saviour and see it to be Schnell. He has small wounds all over and has a deeper cut in his left upper arm. His eyes are hollow, as if a lich had come and taken his soul, though the truth isn't far off. I hand him the gem, which he uses the rest of, as out of nowhere a cheer rings out. In the distance, it seems like the Holy Knight, missing his left arm and severely wounded, was able to kill the Greater Abyssal, though the Greater Priest and Wizard didn't seem to make it. The enemy Abyssal are retreating, and the surviving Overwhelmed soldiers are shooting spells into their backs. The assault was a success. We are now 740 meters closer to the Promised Land. Over the horizon, the sun rises, and contrary to my expectation, Schnell and I are still alive. For now.